our this is our switch the papers. I almost said facility committee, budget and audit committee. And we'll start with a call to order, and then we will see if there is any public comment on non-agenda items.
No such comment.
Okay, thank you. So this says we have the minutes of February 10th to review. And I might be in the same unenviable position that I was in before. Thank you. I got my water down here. Of being the
No, Tammy was on it.
Tammy. All right. Yeah. Phew, I'm feeling better already. Go ahead, Tammy.
Oh, I move we approve the minutes from February 10th, 2021.
Okay. Well,
Do we
I'll
wanna
second it.
Do roll call?
I didn't see it on here.
No,
And
not for a committee meet, not for a committee meeting necessarily. It's not the.
Good.
Y'all are here.
We are. If you're not here, please state so.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm trying to
anyway.
grab which one of these is the minutes.
The motion,
That's third quarter. That's monthly operating. That's OPEB. Did the minutes come in a different?
I renamed it. It's a February 10th, 2021 document.
There it is. I see it. Thank you.
So, no.
All righty. It's all coming back to me now. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. And any discussion on the motion? Take a roll call vote. Trustee Silver.
Aye.
Trustee Martin. Aye. Trustee Osterling.
I think I can vote on this. I attended, I was on.
No. Trustee Osterling, I think the best thing to do would be to
I abstain.
abstain.
There you go. If for no other reason, it gets us through it. Okay, so 311Q, third quarter. I'll look to you, Dr. Andronis, and you can point to whoever you want who's on the.
Well, I'm going to point to Candace Jones, who may point to somebody else.
Okay. I didn't even see Candace on here. Oh, there she is. Okay, now I see you. You're over here.
I'm gonna start, and then we will open for some questions, and then Hedva and I will field those for you. I know that you all had I can project what was sent in your packets really quickly. Let me do that. All right, so this is our operating statement for the 311Q. We are projecting our expenses to be on track for our fiscal year 2021 for what we have budgeted in total. So you'll see that here. So here's our projected fiscal year ending 6/30, as well as where our adjusted budget. Coming down to this area, we do have some savings in our academic salaries and our classified, and that's largely due to reduction in classes due to COVID. Like our adjunct numbers were lower than normal, than what we would anticipate normally, as well as our not hiring some of our limited professional experts pieces. And so these savings then automatically then impact our employee benefit savings, as well as we have received a refund on STRS that we hadn't budgeted. Those pieces then will be go into transfers. Our intention would be to transfer, planning to pre-fund our self-insurance and our capital project funds. You'll notice that always we're doing well in terms of maintaining our 18% reserve. And one thing that I just want to point out based on the other document, this is the actual submittal to the Chancellor's office. I think it's important to note is that this is the first time in quite some time that we've ever had to borrow funds. So we have reported our TRAN 19 million here. because of, and the borrowing was based on our deferral on our apportionment and revenue. So we haven't done that. Trustee Martin could maybe, as the historian, could tell us a lot time, but certainly HEVA can't recall the last time we've ever had to report that. So I wanted to make sure that we noted that. But this is our normal operating piece, and we are on track and for everything that we budgeted through the end of the fiscal year. And if you have any questions, since this is sort of like our normal submission, I'm not sure if you have questions, but if you do, HEDVA or I are happy to fund.
Okay, questions? I have a question if no one else does. First off, I have a compliment. I appreciate you showing the page that you have on the screen, because reading the 311Q in and of itself, the way it lays out, is just very, very confusing to me. And I appreciate seeing it like you have it here. And I really appreciate you pointing out the 19 million trend, because I normally don't even look at that part. I just kind of focus on this. So thank you for pointing that out, Vice President Jones. On the transfers, can you kind of, I'm looking at the -7 million variance there. So something's not getting transferred or something more is getting transferred. Can you just give us a quick take on that?
I'm going to actually tag HEDVA really quickly. I have a thought of a response, but I'd rather you hear from her directly from her.
Okay.
Our thoughts were that we would pre-fund the OPEB, which is generally around $2 million that we would be spending next year. Probably we would want to refund the property and liability insurance, which is somewhere between 1 and 2 million. And there are several projects that the priority list reflected, things that we might want to visit next year. And so we would want to fund the capital projects for those, since we don't have any more Measure P money and all of that.
So you're taking some one-time savings from the categories previously described and transferring them to these other funds that you just described is kind of the long and the short of what's going on, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
the plan.
I appreciate that. I mean, I appreciate, especially, I'm sensitive to the OPEB and trying to get our liability in check. Not to mention the other things you mentioned. So that kind of explains it. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, so we will move on then to our CARES funding overview. And again, I'm going to always look to Erica to point it where she wants it.
And I'm going to point it to you, Vice President Jones.
Makes sense.
Hi, this is me again. I've got a quick little presentation that I'd like to just walk you through. Let me share my screen. All right, so what I'd like to do is focus this evening to just give you a high level around the Higher Education Emergency Relief Fund, we commonly refer to as HERF, and HERF 1, 2, and 3. The institutional portion can be used at the institution's discretion, which is to cover costs associated with the interruption of instruction, significant changes to the delivery of instruction due to the coronavirus. That's the actual advice given from the Chancellor's office. But what's really great is that we've recently received some new guidance on HERF, particularly around the institutional funding. So there's the institutional portions, and then there are direct student portions. So the direct, student aid portions, we know what we're going to be doing that. We're giving those directly to students through our financial aid. And Dr. Olivo has spoken about that at other board meetings. So we know how to allocate those funds. Here with the institutional funding piece, we actually have some new guidance issued back in March that gives us a little bit more flexibility and some clarity around how we can use this funding going forward. So examples of that would be defraying costs, including lost revenue, reimbursement for expenses that we've already incurred, technology costs, faculty, staff, and training, and payroll. We've also been given some guidance that we can carry out student support activities, also authorized under this Federal Higher Education Act of 1965. So there's some additional flexibility there. And one of the new pieces that was just added is that we can also make additional financial aid grants using the institutional portion to students. And so this just came out, and we, our fiscal planning and budget area, as well as our fiscal services area, are always hot off the presses watching any changes to the guidance, because it actually comes out every day. And what we're always looking for is to make sure that as general guidance as it relates to HERF, that we are documenting our internal policies around this funding and make sure that we are maintaining real clear records for audit purposes. All right, so here's a little quick overview, again, of the institutional portion of the HERF funding. So either we were awarded or we're anticipating. So our HERF 1, 2, and 3 anticipated funding, 7.6, another 22 million, and another 26. And this is estimated based on just some calculations. So this may go up a little bit or down a little bit. I think we just today got our final, so I wasn't kidding. It's every day that we get a change or some new guidance on this funding. So the institutional portion of the HERF funding is around $56 million, $56.5 million. What we've expended today is we've made some really great movement on the HERF 1 funding. We have not. This is all recently allocated, so it's what we're anticipating, and it's a drawdown feature. So we have to actually expend the resources and then seek reimbursement for that. So this is the funding in particular that I want to talk to you about. That there's some real required planning that needs to happen with this funding. And so we have some opportunity here to plan this remaining $50 million. Just so you're aware, the other additional grants under the CARES Act, so there's the state and federal block grants, which we received about 2.6 million, and much of it has been expended. There's the CARES Act 1, 2, and 3 of the student portion, and we're anticipating about $41 million. And then there's the CARES Act Minority Serving Institution, which is, we were awarded 2.8 million. So there are a lot of different pockets with a lot of different rules related on the funding pieces. So now, because we have some planning activity to really think about this funding, we have established these focus areas. So we have focus areas on facilities, technology, staffing, students, lost revenue, and safety. And what we're doing is we're trying to align some of the recommendations that are coming out of the Chancellor's office related to types of student-centered decisions around this funding. So examples on facilities, we just came out of the facilities committee, any modifications to improve HVAC would be considered under this area. So we would want to make sure that we're projecting and planning for what's needed. Technology, of course, helping to close the digital divide, providing laptop and Wi-Fi hotspots. That's something that we've been doing. And the really great thing is many of these recommendations, the Chancellor's office came out with 10. We were doing all of them already. which is really, really wonderful. So now it's just, so how do we expand and plan for the duration of the award? So we can use this funding for staffing, so expanded use of instructional aids, using in the LGI courses. We can use this funding for outreach to students. There's some recommendations about reaching out to students who took an EW, so the excused withdrawal, and offer supports to help them return back to college. Of course, lost revenue is an area that we're going to always want to plan for. We've previously used CARES funding for the lost revenue for parking fees and of course, safety, right? We have a lot of safety protocols that we've put in place, like our COVID testing or even PPE equipment. So we've tried to establish these focus areas, and then we're aligning funding requests to those areas so that we can actually try to prioritize the funding appropriately over the duration, which right now is through September of 2023. All right. So here's how we sort of initially thought about that $50 million of the institutional funding. And this is actually, these percentages are driven by what we've already expended in these areas and just sort of projections of what potentially we could do in the future. That doesn't mean that we can't shift and go, if we don't see a need in the facilities and technology side, that we couldn't increase the staffing and student side, or vice versa, the safety piece. These are just areas that we're sort of saying, based on past spend and what we've currently expended, this is kind of how we potentially could break up the funding. So around 20 million for facilities and technology. We have safety considerations that we need to stay on top of, helping to supplement our staffing, as well as lost revenue. Now, a lot of times folks ask about that student portion, and I don't want to speak to it in great detail, other than to say that, again, CARES HERF 1, CARES HERF 2 were about the same, they were the same award, so about 7.6 million, with this anticipated estimated 26 million that we anticipate in the HERF 3 process, which gives us access to about $41.5 million of direct student aid. We have dispersed 100% of the HERF 1 funding. That is already in our students' pockets. It is important that we were one of the earliest colleges to be able to get the funding out and awarded. We're about halfway through our HERF funding for HERF 2, and then we expect to then expend the remaining HERF 3 funding through, again, planning that activity so that funding disbursements can happen through September of 2023, which gives us then some planning pieces that there's about $30 million remaining in the student direct aid portion. All right, so here's the process that we are creating and we'll be rolling out in the next 2 weeks. So we want to engage the community in helping to give us some funding recommendations around the institutional portion, so that remaining 50 million. So we have a COVID-19 task force who's tasked with reviewing the local and state guidelines and giving some recommendations on what we need to purchase. And so we will funnel their recommendations into a consolidated list. We are going to be asking each area vice president to solicit funding opportunities within their areas that are aligned with those 6 focus areas. And then we'll create a form where people can submit ideas, so then we can see a consolidated list. And this list then will be reviewed and prioritized to last the duration of the grant period. So again, we want to make sure that we are diligent about the planning around this funding. And so we're trying to put some structure in place to allow that, and also be transparent about how we're going about that. Our fiscal planning and fiscal services areas are going to continuously monitor our guidance. We got another guidance just today, so we will be looking at that. They are going to be responsible for maintaining our records and our audits, and then also tracking and analyzing our expenses to make sure that we're fully using the money well. So there's some real strategic planning process that needs to happen with this funding. I think that's it. Are there any questions? Trustee Osterling?
Candace, if you could go back 2 or 3 slides. Keep going. Keep going. Okay, this one, yeah, the number 5.
Next one.
Oh, sorry.
Number 5, yeah.
There.
Number 5.
No, yeah, number 5. So go forward to number 5.
Sorry,
There.
my apologies.
No worries.
No
So-
worries.
I'm like, what's number 5? And I'm like, oh, the number of the page.
Candace, under technology, the 3rd bullet point is to modify classroom technology models for hybrid instruction. How would we go about doing that?
Exciting. So we are actually piloting some new technology for our summer classes. And so we have purchased these 360-degree cameras that actually sit on tripods. And so what it does is in the classroom, so if, let's say you had a cohort model where your class was Tuesday, Friday, half of your students came physically on site on Tuesday, the other half came on Friday. What would happen on the Tuesday cohort is that these cameras would work for those who are still in their home locations or their off-site locations to be able to participate with their colleagues in the class. So these cameras actually shift based on who's speaking in the class. And the faculty member actually also has the ability to control. So let's say the faculty member is writing on the whiteboard, then they can actually lock the OWL cam to actually lock on the board and teach to that and then unlock it. And then what that happens, it integrates seamlessly into Zoom. So anytime someone is speaking, then it'll pick, the camera will shift, pick them up, ask the question. So it really allows students who are off-site to interact with students who are on-site, as well as then the instructor to interact with those who are in the room and those who are out. And so we've picked a model that doesn't have like a facilities component yet. We're trying them out. So we're actually going to be mounting them on tripods. And if they work really well, then we could consider in the future also mounting them on the ceilings. That's not something we're moving forward with out of the gate. We want to kind of get used to the technology, have faculty get used to the technology to prove out the model before we make a large investment.
Got it. And that's pretty cool. And did you say that you're testing it already, or the testing will start this summer?
This summer. So we're identifying faculty who want to volunteer, but we've already purchased the cams, and they will not only be used as a pilot in classrooms, we're also going to be using them in some conference rooms.
Great. And so with that technology and with the Zoom technology, are we going to be recording these classes so that those that didn't attend, or those that did, but for refresher, can go back and participate in the class again?
So Zoom always allows for that capability. So the
Right.
recording aspect actually happens through Zoom as opposed to the physical camera itself. And so I would say that those are the models that would be sort of determined through instruction on whether they always record classes, not. I mean, that's not a technology decision per se. That's an instructional decision on how they want to move forward with continuing to record classes. If the answer is that capable, the answer is yes.
And is that instructional decision made by the teacher or the dean or the college? How is that decision made?
Dr. Jonas or Dr. Ramirez?
I'll let Dr. Ramirez answer that.
Can you hear me? I'm lagging. I'm getting offline. Okay, so as far as requiring faculty to record, we do not require it. That is part of our instructional modality if they are teaching synchronously. we expect the students to be there. Having said that, we do highly recommend that faculty have options for students to make sure they can catch up to the class if they have to miss. So we can use the technology. Faculty can record themselves. It already happens in Canvas via their either using Zoom or the Blue technology that's part of Canvas as well.
Thank you. And then, Candace, my second question is on lost revenue. I understand the notion that we've lost revenue due to COVID, but how do we document what we spent the money on for lost revenue? And in other words, so yes, we lost revenue and we're going to receive money to replace that lost revenue, but as opposed to turning in a receipt that we spent something, how do you document the money that you're receiving for lost revenue? And then what do you actually do with it? The money just goes into the bank because we're not going to spend it per se. It's to make up for revenue that we lost.
Right. I'm gonna tag Hedva. I see her unmuting because she helps to maintain all of those records for us.
Some of the allowable ways to compute lost revenue, for instance, the loss of parking revenue, you can take the last 3 or 4 years, take an average and keep that as your documentation, submit that as an expense, draw it down. And so then once I got the money, which I've already done, I've reimbursed the parking fund and made them whole because their expenses were still continuing. We still had to pay the staff. Another one that I did was for the Rose Bowl. I pulled the last 3 or 4 years of amounts that we received from cheap seats or whatever it was. And we split it between, we had always contracts, and some went to associated students and some went to the district. I computed the average, I documented it and got it signed off and drew down the money and reimbursed both areas that we've applied the Rose Bowl. Those were just 2. And I'll be doing the same kind of analysis, probably closer towards the end of the semester, as I just took a class and they said that you had to do it for the, you can't draw down earlier than the period is ended. So if there's the Civic Center rentals, possibly childcare, possibly lost revenue from bookstore, I-8. There's a lot of avenues that we have not received, and I'll compare what we have received to the last 5-year or 4-year average, and then do a computation and draw it down.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions?
Tammy has a question.
I'm sorry, I don't see, because I only have a limited number of boxes up there. There, go ahead, Tammy, just.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Under students and the outreach to students with some colleges. So on the outreach, I'm thinking we could temporarily hire some people to make phone calls, texts. Could we also use that to buy texting programs or create an app that we would then have for years to come that would help us reach out to students in the future?
All of those would be allowable. We would just need to document the initial need due to COVID.
Okay. Great.
Okay, other good questions? I have to scroll back and forth here.
Yeah, it's kind of hard.
Yeah, because I don't see everybody on one. Okay, Jim.
I see under staffing, increased staffing for enhanced cleaning protocols. I'm in favor of, cleaning and disinfecting and having clean campuses, but we heard recently in the last month or so from the, it was either from the CDC or Fauci's department, that actually all of this time and money and effort that we've spent on cleaning surfaces was not really important or effective. The key to stopping transmission is distancing and masks and airborne as opposed to on the surfaces. And I'm just wondering, are we still going forward full bore with all of these surface cleaning efforts if the advice that we're now getting is that they're not really the critical element?
So the way I would respond, Trustee Osterling, is to say these again are, a lot of these are just recommendations that came out through the Chancellor's office. We still have some investment in the types of cleaning materials that we're purchasing, and so we would include that under. There are some new. And Richard, of course, would speak more eloquently about the antibacterial, disinfectant solutions that he's purchasing. And so those require some training and may, depending on what it is, may increase our staffing need. So, but all of these pieces are just focus areas for recommendations. And I think we would pair the recommendations with any latest news coming out from the CDC to then prioritize how we spend the funding. These aren't actual commitments. They are just ideas to help generate some thought process as our community gives us ideas about how to do this.
So I should have asked that question in our last meeting, not this meeting. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'm scrolling again here. Any other questions? It's a wonderful problem to have. Somehow I lost the simple numbers. The total amount of the money, and of that total, let's call it 56 million. Of the 56 million, how much of that is direct student support? And how much of that is more discretionary support?
So the portions that I'm showing, this 56 million, is actually the institutional portion.
This is the institutional part. And
Correct.
Then on top of this was the two tiers of 7 million.
Correct. The 41 million, 41.6
Go back
million.
to that slide. Yeah,
I'm sorry,
Ken,
I'm
go
kind
back
of
to that
losing
slide.
it in the big numbers, you know?
So there's the institutional, and then she'll show you the student.
And okay, so the total we're actually receiving is 91.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, this
And I think
It's
the other
staggering.
thing I think the other thing to include here too is the fact that the institutional portion also can be used for direct student aid.
Yes.
So right now we know at a minimum what we need to spend for direct student aid is the 41 million, but depending on what we think our expenses are, both immediately as well as between now and September 30th, 2023, there is a high likelihood that we will transition some of those institutional funds over to direct student aid. So we're just going, we know this is for students, we know this is us, but we have permissible, we can spend it on students too, which is really good because, if we find that our institutional needs are met, obviously we want to support our students.
okay.
And that's the new guidance that came out just in March around using the institutional portion for student aid.
So the numbers are so big and the needs, obviously you've outlined them so well and could go a million ways here. The only vague direction or comment that I would say personally is to the extent that we can use the institutional money to do something that generates an ongoing benefit.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that would be my priority. For example, Tammy mentioned an app, and I'm not sure if that's even in the food chain or what you're working on. But if we could use, this money to develop an app that can be used for years to come, or you mentioned purchasing these cameras, give us that capability to have more online or hybrid classes in the future, which could have, long-term benefits to reach more students year after year after year because we could make this one-time investment. That would really ring for me,
Right.
how to leverage this. Now, what those things are, and I no clue, but
Yeah,
that's
and
the way I would work. My
and
mind
we're
would work.
expanding our ability to reach out to students by way of texting right now, to simplify surveys, because we have a lot of surveys we want students to do, but also as a way to collect customer satisfaction, and also to do exactly what you're talking about, outreach. But we don't need to build an app. There's an app for that.
Yeah,
What we need to do is make sure and I know that I think Cynthia's had a part of this, Crystal has had a part of this, Candace's area has had a part of this, trying to figure out, okay, what is the best app that we can buy, an app that will allow us to draw on our integrated system and meet the needs of outreach and of all of this. So absolutely. And this is a great opportunity for us to invest in that. Mhm.
right. So that would be my highest priority, would be anything that we can do that not just benefits a student today, but create something that can benefit next year's students and next year's and next year's.
Yeah.
Yeah, and John, following on that same theme, for example, the air quality things that we talked about at the facilities meeting, long after the COVID threat is come and gone, hopefully, the idea of having improved indoor air quality to deal with bacteria and other common viruses
Mhm.
and auto emissions, to improve our air quality and the health of our students, faculty, and staff on an ongoing basis, would be, and I know we're doing it, but that's another.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. So when COVID-23 rolls around, or COVID-28 or whatever it is.
Well, hopefully there's not another COVID, even if
No,
we
I'm just saying, whatever it is.
never have another COVID,
Smoke.
have the worst air quality in the country.
And
Yeah.
smoke from the
No, that's a
fires.
great example.
Yeah,
Could have fires for
yeah.
years to come, and this will
Right.
close the door to the classroom, and you've got clean air to breathe.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great example of what I'm thinking. Leaving it to the college to figure out what those things are, I have no idea. So, okay, wow, what a problem to have. Gotta love it.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think we're gonna move on to the PARS update, which is next. Dr. Jonas, I
Well,
look
I
to
think
you.
I will go to, I'll go
You
to
pick.
Vice President Jones.
So many great people's pictures I'm looking at to pick from.
We are going to hear from Hedva.
Okay.
I have talked enough. Hedva, do you want me to show it from my screen, or do you want to do it from your screen?
I can do either. I can share my screen.
Why don't you be in charge?
Okay. I don't think. Can you see this? I don't, the screen was really weird.
I can, yes.
Yes.
Small, but
They're small, yeah.
oh, no, it's okay.
No, I can read it. March
Fine.
2021 point. Now I can't, but it was 0.59 before you made it bigger. Now I can read it. Yeah.
Can you read
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
There's, we're doing great in our PARS account. And the earnings for both the OPEB and the pension stability are both 8.47. I'll just show you right here. We've
Yeah.
earned 3.5 million, and here was 8.5%. So they're both around 8.5%. Both are doing well. If it was in LACO, it would be under 1%. So we have a future money that we could use for OPEB if we needed to. Right now, we have not tapped into it. And just, it's a conservative strategy. There wasn't much I was going to share. It's a conservative strategy. 20% bonds, or actually more than that. US bonds, 38%, equity, 25%. So there's really not much I have to say about it, other than it's looking good so far.
Okay, questions or comments from the members?
This is a comment, and I want to give a tribute to the chair of this committee, Trustee Martin, who was a long and constant agitator to take the money out of LACO and make some real earnings with it. And John, it took a lot of persistence on your part to make that happen, but you did, and we can see the results here. So thank you for really being the persistent advocate for this.
Okay, other questions or comments? I actually do, and I want to give my appreciation to, I think, again, Dr. Jones, that got us the background from PARS on the investments, or Chedba, whoever did it. And I find it a fascinating read, and I sit and work with a couple different investment committees. So I kind of enjoy hearing and seeing different pieces and different philosophies, different portfolios with different objectives, of course. And I was kind of surprised to see the amount that the portfolio composition had changed from the last report that you had given us, which was September 30. So in this 6-month period, for example, though the total, maybe the total equity fixed income may have stayed roughly the same. I didn't actually look at that. The composition within those particular funds changed, I'd say, significantly. There was, in the previous rendition, 15% allocated to inflation protected securities, and now there's none. So they basically vacated all of that. And I didn't realize that this fund had quite that much, what I'll say, movement in it, within it. And as I see stuff like that, and I realize these are really, PARS is a really big investor. We're just but a small part of the very big scheme. So there's great minds at work here. I did think that it would be advantageous to, at least periodically, as happens in all my other investment meetings, to actually hear from the manager themselves that have their hands on this. I don't know if that would be the PARS representative or I don't know where in the food chain who's deciding this, but that'd be an interesting question to know. And they did give us in the documentation a little bit of their thinking, as they gave you a commentary on what they're thinking. You read that, you can see why they were maybe making some of the changes they were making. But because in some ways we are the fiduciaries of this, I wouldn't mind at a future meeting setting up, especially when we're on Zoom and it's convenient for them, having the main asset manager or whoever's the deciding force here come in, address the committee, make a short presentation. Usually the other committees I sit on, they tell you quickly they give you the Chedweb report, quickly what has happened. I mean, most people, we can see that. And then they give you a little bit of the verbal that goes behind the commentary that we read on how they're thinking and why they have made some changes they've made and what they're planning on doing. I certainly don't have the expertise to ever second guess them, but I do like hearing what they have to say. And I do like, in a way, that it tells them we're watching. and we care. And I think that's two good messages going back and forth. So at some meeting with a little lighter agenda, maybe we could cue that up, and we don't have to make it a ritual or anything, but at least it would address how the PARS system works. Who decides we're going out of inflation protected, and who's making those, how often do they rebalance? Boom. And even a review, and I'm happy that we're in a conservative portfolio, but one of the questions I'd be thinking, because I think there were 4 different choices and we picked the most conservative, which I'm happy. Tell us what other institutions, what other ones are they picking? Community colleges in California, how many do you have? What other ones are they picking? Obviously, our portfolio has to meet our distribution needs for the future. So it's not like just because they do this, we should do that, because the distribution needs are totally different. So the portfolios could be totally different. But based on what our management is saying to PARS as far as potential distributions over the next 5 years or not, would have impact on maybe which portfolio they'd recommend we would be in, right? So I think a review of that kind of magnitude would also be helpful. Because we got some money in this thing now.
Mhm.
It's some serious money now. So we want it to be there for OPEB and the other things that we have.
Yep.
We will
Absolutely.
pursue that.
Okay, I saw all the head shaking, so that's really good for me. That's the nice thing about Zoom. You can just, it's either that or the Dodgers finally got a hit. Because everybody's going like this, it's one or the other, something happened. Okay, anything else on PARS? Okay, meeting schedule. When do you need us to meet again?
Well, I think we need to have you meet again on June 9th because we need to talk about the tentative budget.
Sounds good. And is June 9th is the week before a
Yes.
regular board meeting? Okay.
Yep.
So we'll plan for June 9th. And then future agenda items. Well, I guess I kind of laid out one under the last topic. It's kind of part of the PARS and part future agenda that we give it a little more attention at some meeting. Any other future agenda topics?
No,
Where did
but
Tammy
what
go?
you
There
can
you are.
see below the meeting schedule, it's mapped out in terms of the coming fiscal year and what's going to be discussed at each one. So we have August 11th, that would be the 4th quarter, 3/11, September 1st, because the adopted budget and the 3/11 will go to the Board of Trustees on September 8th, November 3rd, 1st quarter, 3/11. And then you have the external auditors, then the finance audit in December, then February is 2nd quarter, 3/11, May next year, 3rd quarter, and then June 8th would be the tentative budget. So it's all in.
So I'd queue up the PARS people on one of these that all you're doing is a 311Q.
Okay.
And probably not the 4th quarter 311Q, because
No,
that's
how
the
about the
one
third?
that is the real deal, right?
Yeah. So how about the
So-
first one, maybe November 3rd?
Yeah, that would. Yeah, the first 311Q, what's that, right? It's
Okay.
like warm up. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Okay, class has started. So, okay. All right, anything else then before we officially adjourn? Thank you all. Thank you for all the extra people that came along with us tonight for this. Always good to see people, at least names, see names. If I don't get to see people, I see names. So I know you're there. Okay, then we're officially adjourned. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Trustee Martin. Thank you, Trustee Osterling and Trustee Tammy.
You're welcome.
And everybody else for all your hard work. You're killing